Welcome to Serverless Inside, where we peek behind the curtain and find out how we build our serverless products and features here at AWS. I'm Julian Wood. I'm a developer advocate for the serverless team at AWS, and I'm joined by David.
Hi, I'm David Nasi. I'm the head of product for AWSLambda.
And Nick.
And I'm Nick Colt. I'm the director of product for Serverless at AWS.
And Steve.
Hi, I'm Steve. I lead the product team for ECS.
So we are celebrating 10 years of ECS and Lambda this year. So looking back on your 7 years of Lambda out of the 10, what's one of the sort of coolest or funnest or most impactful things that you've been involved with Lambda?
Yeah, there are many. I would say that the capabilities that we launched that get me inspired the most and satisfy me the most is when we do something that eliminates a whole host of heavy lifting for customers without them thinking about how they're going to adopt it, using versions or anything like that. And it's all kind of enabled under the hood on customers' behalf. And so one such feature that I really enjoyed working on is our work on Lambda Snapstart. So essentially, it resolved a very difficult problem on customers' behalf of how do you actually deliver a very performant startup for applications when traffic for the application increases without having them to incur the entire initialization penalty. And in this specific feature, we employed a lot of innovation under the hood that required very deep work on the Linux kernel and the underlying distributed systems that in the end manifested for customers in just one checkbox that they mark, and all of a sudden they get up to 10x improvement in their startup latency. And I felt that was kind of the epitome of that magic of Lambda that just does things for you without you having to do any of those underlying things.
Is that what you would say one of the sort of enduring things of serverless is that we just do stuff on your behalf so you don't have to, just to make it simpler that you can run your applications in the cloud?
Yeah, absolutely. And that is, I think, the key thing that motivates our entire team to deliver for customers.
Steve, you on the ECS side of the house, Elastic Container Service, what was your keenness or interest to join that?
Yeah, so I have been at AWS for about 6 years. When I actually joined, I was on a service that used ECS under the hood, right? And so ECS, what we would consider in many ways a foundational services, a lot of other AWS services use it to build their own offerings that we use to extend to other customers. So I started off on one of those services. And so I had seen how ECS works and operates. I'd seen a lot of the customers, the external customers that ECS also has, and that was very interesting to me. And so the opportunity came up to join the product team on ECS itself. And I jumped at the chance because it's such a foundational service.
Are there any particular parts of ECS that sort of spark your brain thinking that is cool?
Yeah, so definitely the Fargate, I would say in terms of capacity management and the ability to abstract away infrastructure is just super cool, and customers get really excited about that. And just kind of intellectually, from my own perspective, it's really interesting to see how we can take what is quite a complicated thing in just figuring out, okay, what sorts of capacity should we pick? How can we offer that to customers? How do we manage it and maintain the life cycle of compute? And do it in a way that is largely transparent to customers. And we're always thinking through those problems. And that's really what gets my brain fired up, is thinking about capacity and infrastructure and how we manage that and make it easy for customers to use.
I suppose ECS being 10 years old, but Fargate's 6 years old. So sort of when you joined that, and that is the sort of serverless part of containers where there is just much less infrastructure to manage.
Yeah, for sure. And then there's definitely that compute side in terms of like the actual compute, but in terms of ECS as a cluster management tool, you can also consider that effectively a serverless concept, right? Sure, there's a cluster in ECS is just an abstract, effectively just an abstract thing, a name that we just have in the customer's namespace. In the customer's account, there's no underlying infrastructure that they have to worry about. The mechanism that we use to place ECS tasks, for example, that is all just abstract away from the customers. So in many ways, we consider a lot of ECS serverless.
And Nick, you have a sort of broader view as you are sort of chief of product for a whole bunch of different serverless services at AWS. what made you pick serverless as a thing to join?
Well, before I was in product management, I was a developer. I spent many years working as a scientist, working as a developer, writing a lot of code. And I spent a lot of time as a developer struggling around simple questions like, I don't understand, it worked on your laptop, why doesn't it work on our server? Or, okay, we need to run this 20 times faster. How do we do that? Things that when you're living in a world of servers and deploying code as packages to servers are hard problems, right? And when I discovered containers, about 10 years ago is when I first got started on containers, I realized, oh, this can save so much time. You don't have to worry about all the packaging and dependencies. And then when I started to learn about AWS and I became an AWS customer and I saw the opportunity to not only use containers, but to actually work on the systems that deploy those at scale in the cloud, that got me really excited. So I got in the door here as a product manager on the ECS team. Was learning about all the other services adjacent to that, like Lambda and Event Bridge and step functions. And just this mentality that I soon became a very big proponent of, that, as a developer, you want to focus on your application and what makes it work. And you don't want to spend time on all those other things. And the fact that you can go from an idea to a working application in an afternoon was just so incredibly exciting to the developer and me that I really wanted to be part of the team that's making that happen and charting the future of that. So that's kind of my story of going from being a scientist and a developer to leading product management for serverless at AWS.
So you're doing the sort of product management part of it. But Steve, why should customers care about serverless? Is serverless a thing they should be thinking about or caring about?
Yeah.
What's the enduring benefit to them?
Yeah, in many ways, right, it's a little bit of a paradox, right? You don't want to be thinking about serverless, that's kind of the point, but you should be thinking about it in some ways, right? So in where I would say where serverless has its future is that the modern application, right, building an application that can scalable, that can scale, that can be resilient, that can handle the most demanding of workloads that users can throw at it and just have that infrastructure already in place, that just takes an awful lot of work. It takes still takes a very high degree of skill. It takes a very high degree of cloud knowledge, especially as you think about increasing demands on security, increasing demands on efficiency and utilization. And that is where serverless has a very large role to play in today's applications, because the amount of expertise and work that it takes at a very low level to get compute talking to each other in a secure manner, especially as you start to consider more advanced application constructs like microservices and distributed applications in that way. Serverless has a very large role to play in saving customers and taking that expertise and making it so that any customer has access to the most modern operational models that exist today.
When you're speaking to customers now, obviously on many modernization journeys, and they may not even think, care, or understand about serverless, but you did mention microservices and a sort of, that's always a transformational journey. Yeah. How should customers think about how ECS can help them? If someone is thinking about using ECS today, what's the problem it's going to solve in terms of their microservices or their organization or their problems?
Well, I think ECS is a little bit unique because it does offer that serverless benefit, but it operates just on a container that you might have, let's say, for example, on your on-premise, or just something that, as Nick said, just on your laptop, right? And that idea of being able to take advantage of a serverless architecture while just moving your container and bringing it into the cloud and bringing that application that you're already running and just bringing it into a cloud in a container is super useful for customers. And so that's where we see on the modernization journey, we can, okay, I have this running in a container on either my on-premise cluster or just on my computer. Let's get it into the cloud and let's start taking advantage of serverless. And then we can start talking about breaking it up into potentially microservices or doing something a little bit more advanced in terms of doing networking or more what we would consider a modern application. And so that in terms of microservices. So that is where I think customers often start with ECS, is when they just say, hey, I'm just trying to get something to run. I want to take advantage of serverless, and I don't want to do a lot to make sure that it runs in a super scalable, efficient way, right? ECS just takes care of that for you.
David, Lambda is obviously slightly different from ECS, even though it's serverless, but it's started in a way more opinionated way for building applications, which provided a way that people could run their code with thinking about, far less, no operating systems to patch and manage and this kind of thing. But when Lambda started, it was, very short execution environments, small amounts of memory you could have. Lambda's really expanded in terms of the kind of workloads that you can run. How should customers think about Lambda today in the kind of applications they can build?
Yeah, I think that when we launched Lambda, we couldn't imagine the breadth of use cases and the types of applications that customers will build. And we were blown away by all the richness of the types of applications from, modeling and designing therapeutics and genomics applications to, modeling financial risk analyses or running sophisticated data processing applications or serving, web traffic and more standard web applications. And so over time, what we saw is that customers love the operational model and the simplicity that Lambda gives, but they require some additional capabilities to make this model work within the context of their application and the pattern that they're using it with. And so we're always glad to oblige as to what our customers need and what they're asking from us. And so over time, we expanded the programming model. We increased the resources customers use across compute and integrations and so forth. But what always drives our roadmap and our philosophy with Lambda is that Lambda is this opinionated service. And with every capability that we give customers, we don't want to detract from the value of those opinions because we think those opinions codify a lot of the learnings that we had as AWS in building distributed applications.
That must be an interesting thing to think about from a product perspective, because as Lambda expands and has more features and parts of it, but part of Lambda's enduring advantage is how simple it is to just upload your code to the cloud. So how do you square the competing priorities of getting Lambda to do more and more demands on Lambda with keeping it still simple and easy to use?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that has been part of the product philosophy that we've been developing, where Lambda should always remain simple in the sense that the default way and the way that all the knobs are configured for you to consume and build your applications are always turned on the best practices and the features that we know customers like in terms of the way they simplify things. And these more advanced and net new capabilities that we deliver, we try to deliver them in a way that customers can pick them up in a way of progressive discovery, right? So as they make their Lambda journey and they need to pick up like an additional tool or an additional capability, that is surfaced as just another small knob to, check or configure over that time in a way that is progressively discovered versus kind of surfacing all of that complexity up front. And that's what we've been trying over the years to do.
Nick, you have a sort of portfolio view of this because there used to be a time, which I remember clearly, of containers versus serverless. Never made sense to me because I think we understand that maybe some customers are going to maybe use both, or they're going to use one or the other, and doesn't matter. How do you think about having ECS and Lambda and step functions and Event Bridge within a sort of portfolio of services, and how customers think about the various capabilities?
Well, it makes a lot of sense, because if you look at and you talk to our customers, you'll find that a large percentage of them use all of the above. They use Lambda, they use ECS, they use step functions, they use Event Bridge, they're using database services and storage. A modern application needs all of the above. And like David was saying, like we have a pretty clear view of what Lambda is and what it's for, and what ECS is and what it's for. And we've worked hard over the years to communicate that to customers as well, so that I think a lot of our customers understand pretty well Lambda is running your code and takes an opinion on how that code runs, right? And we do a lot of work to make sure that we can run it reliably at scale, that we have very well-defined language runtimes. ECS and Fargate in some ways is in a different layer of the stack, right? Because it's running in a container. And what is a container? A container is really any software that you can package up as a container image. And it takes fewer opinions about what's in that container. And that brings flexibility, but because it's less opinionated, there's more prerequisites to use it. And so a lot of our customers understand those differences, and they will mix and match and use containers for this part of their application and Lambda for another part of their application, and combine those into a whole where they're getting the best of all of the different pieces that we have to offer in our portfolio. And we're very interested in doubling down on that and making it easier to use these services together, making the differences and the opinions between them even clearer to customers, so that over time we'll have an even clearer picture of when you use which service for which part of your application.
Nick, you mentioned databases and other kind of services. You obviously have a suite of products that you look after, but obviously serverless impacts, from analytics and databases and machine learning, as Steve mentioned. So the portfolio of serverless at AWS is much bigger than an individual organization and even the services you work on. So what does serverless mean to you in 2024 and, going forward?
In a lot of ways, to me, serverless is a way of life. That might sound a little bit of a squishy term, but what are the things that you want to be responsible for, and what are the things that you do not want to be responsible for? And serverless is a choice about what you want to be responsible for. And it's really focused on the things that matter to you as a customer in a business. And most customers today don't want to be in the business of managing infrastructure. They don't want to be in the business of figuring out how to scale this database or how to scale the number of servers so that their application doesn't fail. They don't want to think about those things. They want to think about, how do I move faster so that I can serve my customers faster? How do I bring new innovations to market in my product? That's what they care about. And if you take that lens as being what serverless is all about, then as David was saying, more and more of AWS is moving in that direction of removing the responsibility and the need for customers to manage the things that they don't care about. And what that means varies by, database services. That means a particular thing. In compute, that means a particular thing. And the meaning of those things is going to change over time. And Gen AI is going to introduce a new dimension there in terms of how applications are built. That's still evolving, and we're still, developing our understanding of what that means for customers. But I think that core idea that serverless is an operational model and a mindset for what you want to own and what you don't want to own, and you don't want to own infrastructure. And however you define infrastructure, you don't have to manage that if you pick serverless.
I suppose there's a story there as serverless. You are trusting your cloud provider to do more for you. And so in a way that's going to reduce your cognitive load, reduce what you need to do. If you need to or want to jump out of that, you're actually going to need to do more. You're going to have to take more integrations, but you're going to be able to take your container, move it anywhere. Your Lambda code is entirely portable to elsewhere. So it is, I suppose, thinking about things in a different way. But a serverless approach, you're just going to, allow the cloud provider to take on the hard stuff so you don't have to.
Yes.
Thanks for joining us on Serverless Inside, where we look behind the curtain at AWS to see how our serverless services and features are all built from the product people who are making them.